welcome to the Mime Radio Show. I'm Karen Hoyer.
And I'm James Donlin. We'd also like to introduce our man in the booth, the man behind the curtain today. Circumstances have created a situation where Mike must be in his little alcove. We won't see his face, but Mike Diaz is the man that makes this all happen. And we're happy he's back there somewhere helping us to be confident in front of you people.
So, James, as you can see, I wore my clown hair today. Who's our guest?
Yeah, and I wore my Arlecchino colors.
Yes.
Our guest today enjoyed a generic childhood in Atlanta, Georgia. Isn't that interesting? As a kid, his passions were snakes and juggling. He wanted to be a doctor, but after a year as an honors chemistry and biology major, his parents forced him into performing. And now he defies description, and his worldwide acclaim is unquestioned. Hailed as one of the greatest clowns of all time, Avner Eisenberg is often a featured performer in comedy, magic, clown, and theater festivals everywhere. He teaches eccentric performing and is a certified Ericksonian hypnotist. He lives on an island off the coast of Maine and would really rather be sailing. Let's welcome to the Mime Radio Show, Avner Eisenberg.
Ta-da!
Hey, I heard you guys were here.
Yeah, we're here.
Avner, welcome. And we're so glad to have you today.
It's so good to see you.
Yeah. What's the weather like in Maine today on the island?
It is beautiful and a hint of fall in the air. So I have my vest on.
Absolutely. Fabulous.
I'm sure we have lots and lots of questions and stories to tell today. Let's get started with what happens right before you go on stage. Now, when I was doing a little bit of research on your website, there is a tech writer that has a whole long list of things that are required for an Avner performance, which was really fascinating. So there's a lot of preparation that happens to set you up. But what do you do personally to start?
I'm trying to take a nap. I think that's the most important thing. It's that and take your wallet on stage with you.
Yeah.
Those two things will serve you better than any worrying that you can possibly do. My motto in touring has always been no surprises. So I send a very detailed tech writer with a full light plot and a stage plot and all the rigging. And then we do I say we do. I haven't done a show since last February.
Right.
So this is all distant memory. But we call the tech director ahead of time, the marketing people, and go over everything so that when we arrive at the theater, there are no surprises. It takes a lot of work to look like you're not working.
Yeah. And I know you have lots of disciplines that you've been involved in over the course of your full life. So do you do any Aikido, or do you stand on your head, or do you think about some psychological thing right before you go on, or is it mostly just getting up from the nap?
Yeah, that'll pretty much do it. I do practice Aikido. I've been practicing Aikido for over 30 years, and that's my major form of exercise. And even now with COVID, although the first year of COVID, we had only Zoom classes and some really innovative ways of practicing Aikido. Then there was practice with people in masks, but I didn't feel safe going to those. But we were doing things where you would hold a beach ball and someone would grab the other side of the beach ball, and you could actually throw them by manipulating the
Interesting
ball.
What's right before the lights come on, or you step onto the stage, or you wander onto the stage? What goes through your mind right before the moment, right before you step into the public's eye? What happens up here?
I've for 35 years I've been teaching. Since when we first met at Del Arte, I've been asking students that same question. What's your basic emotional state before you go on stage? And overwhelmingly, the answer is, I hope it doesn't suck. And then I started asking, because in class, as you know, you sit and watch each other. I've been to a million clown shows. I asked them the same question. When you're in the audience, what's your basic emotional state? And the answer is the same thing. I hope it doesn't suck.
Yeah.
So we've got the audience and the performers, and they're terrified of each other. That's the first thing. So when I go on stage, and this goes back to my background in biology, I scan the space and I exhale. And that exhale says, oh, it's you. I'm comfortable with you watching me.
Now, do you peek at all at who's out there, like in
No.
various ways? And some people I have been known to look through the curtain and see who my subject might be in the audience, or what their character is, or you don't do that sort of thing?
No.
Yeah.
And when I look out, my what I'm saying to myself is, I'm comfortable with you watching me.
Yeah. Let's spend time together.
So
let's spend quality time. Yeah.
I'm going to clean the stage before the show starts. So
Literally.
It starts with an apology. Yeah, literally.
Yeah.
So who is that audience? Now, how has that audience changed from when you started? What kind of people are out there, and what is their attitude? Do you see a change in how they relate to mime and clown?
Or just general too? Who are those people out there to you?
The only change has been that the art form has matured, so that I used to say that clown was my favorite 4-letter word. Mime is a 4-letter word too.
Right.
There's a lot of animosity toward those words. So I try to deal with the people where they're at. The more animosity they bring toward that, animosity isn't the right word. The more the adults are there thinking this is a kid show, the more work you have to do to win them over. But after touring for 40 years now, playing on Broadway, being in movies, I really don't think about that. I'll take whoever comes.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And my job is to move them from wherever they're at to enthusiasm by the end of the show.
And
are you? I was gonna say, are you? Based on what you just said, are you now serving yourself more than them, or is it always there, the respect and the gift for the audience? You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Because you say, I'm not worried who they are. I'll take what comes. Is it because you're so confident in yourself and so relaxed in yourself and so at ease that becomes, it's almost like taking a break in a sense into your imagination,
I try to create rapport, which is a sense of a close, harmonious relationship, but basically try to create a situation where the audience is feeling the emotions that the character, and I'm the character, feeling those emotions and actually breathing with me.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not observing the show and I'm not working for them. We're doing this together. I think there's a wonderful quote from Lecoq that you don't clown for people, you clown with them.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So
spend time with them.
The thing that I find so wonderful about your show, your character, is that everything is being discovered in the moment.
Mm-hmm.
And what I was thinking about this is like this incredible show that you've been doing for many, many years in many different places, but always the clown is arriving for the first time, which is for the audience really a gift. How do you keep a hold of that, being in the moment and making it for the first time?
I'm not there to entertain the audience. I'm there to clean the stage. And I think it's very important for a performer. I got to go back a little bit to answer this because for more than 40 years, I've been performing as a clown. And I still don't have a good workable definition of what a clown is.
Mm.
I've been to one big clown convention. I had to give a sort of keynote address. And I had dinner with the directors of the convention. And I asked them at dinner, how do you define clown? And they didn't have one.
Now, is this like, I mean, we all know there's different styles of clowning, especially in our country, right? I mean, is this, for example, this convention you went to, is this the parade clown, the birthday clown, the stage clown, everybody?
It's everybody.
Yeah.
So I stood up to give this talk. Now, this was more people than I'd spoken in front of since my bar mitzvah. And I looked out, and there were 400 or 500 clowns, and they all had big shoes and bow ties and yak hair wigs. It was terrifying. Lots of primary colors, polka dots and stripes. And so I started my talk by saying, clowning is a lot like pornography. You can't define it, but you know it when you see it.
Yeah.
So another time, I was at I lied. I actually was at another clown convention, but I wasn't performing or teaching, but I was there with students, and we went to the gala show. And after the show, we were talking about it, and I asked the students, well, what did you guys think? And their conclusion was, well, there were a lot of clowns, but not very much clowning.
Mm-hmm.
And I realized that for me, clown doesn't exist. It's a costume. It's a red nose and a costume. But clowning is a series of attitudes and techniques that we can talk about, that we can analyze. And I realized the great clowns, Grock, Chaplin, Keaton, Lucille Ball, the great clowns that I admire, that I study, not one of them looks like a clown. But they're
interesting.
They're clowning all the time.
Right. Right. It's like Carlo Mazzoni would say, comedy was a state of mind. I remember him saying that. So that's similar. That's a similar thought that you're giving. Yeah. It's interesting. Your statement about, well, I don't know if I can define it, and I've sort of not worried about it, because it's the same with mime. Like what's a mime, the blah blah blah. But it's, and we struggle for like 40-50 years trying to label ourselves because of the packaging in our culture, right, that we have to have. And suddenly you got, I like your attitude is, let's just say, forget it, it's in the cosmos and it is what it is. It's a state of mind.
I think there were some key moments that started to redefine things, and I don't have them exactly in order, but one was the FOAM, the Festival of American Mime in Milwaukee.
Yep, I was there.
Which said that there is an art form called mime, and it's not just illusion pantomime that Marceau was doing.
Right.
I've always admired Marceau. He invented an art form. Mm-hmm. And there aren't very many people that we can say that about. The next one was in Davis and Elkins College, and I have an advanced copy of the book. Let's see, it's right here, Delighting the Senses, that Mike Pedretti, who was the director of that, and he said he lumped the whole thing together and said, this is movement theater.
Movement theater.
And that took in everything. It gave us a basket to be in, no more or less deplorable than other baskets.
And you were a new vaudevillian at one point too, according to others. That's another phrase that was used.
That was the next thing that came, and I've been trying to track it down, and I'm not sure. But the story that I remember is that in the early 80s, there were several acts that played on Broadway. So they were doing full evening shows, but doing what were traditional vaudeville skills, which is to say they did 10 or 12 minutes. So it was the Flying Karamazov brothers, Bill Irwin, Penn and Teller, and myself. We all played on Broadway, and they didn't know what to call us.
Yeah.
And I believe it was Mel Gussow who coined the term new vaudeville.
Oh, I didn't know that. I didn't know where that phrase came from.
Pretty sure that's where it came from.
That's so interesting. How do you explain that? That there was that period, like one of my questions on this yellow piece of paper was, is there a golden age of clown and mime, let's say, in the USA? Would you say that around this time in the 80s, there was kind of a pinnacle of acceptance, for example, on, you know, on the highest stages like Broadway? Because you're right. And since your Mummenschanz was on Broadway,
Mummenschanz was
that sort of thing. And, you know, but what do you think about, I mean, what contributed to that period of time to,
well, I think it was these shows that were popular, that won the popular vote, but they weren't book shows, they weren't musicals. They didn't know what to call them, so they put it in that basket, and immediately everybody stopped. Every street performer started calling themselves a new vaudevillian. So
right.
all the new vaudevillians said, "Oh no, we're not that." I remember my agent at the time telling me that I had to not use that word in interviews. I know Penn and Teller. Well, there was a funny quote. It was really just good marketing on their part. They said, "Well, we're not new vaudevillians. New vaudevillians are a bunch of aging hippies."
But, you know, then you had Blue Man Group, and you like Penn and Teller, you know, these people started on the street. I mean, there was Robert Shields, you know, became a network TV persona. You know, there was this period of time in that late 70s, early 80s when there was all this movement on broad stages in the public's eye.
Yeah.
So there was, to me, there was a kind of a mystery, like the others, we'll call them the others, the movers and shakers that produced these things. You know, to me, they were captivated by the mystery and by the you know, the skills that the performers had at that time. And that's, you know, it's never quite been the same. Like busking was the golden age of busking too, was that mid 70s to mid 80s was kind of the 10-year period of, you know, all this richness on the streets, but you don't see that so much anymore at all.
It was funny. We sort of moved from the left to the right without going through the middle.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah.
Interesting.
I think also at that time period, there were a lot of festivals which brought the community together. There were publications. There were, you know, groups of people that were like connecting to each other that way. And
lack of technology. There was a lack of media technology that contributed to it, you know.
But the other thing that I wanted to just mention is like one of the reasons that motivated James and I to create this podcast was the fact that there are so many people that have done so much work, and we want to archive it, but we also want to inspire people that this is an amazing art form that still has lots to explore and many different avenues, and like how can we inspire the current and the next generation?
Yeah, they were like you know, Avner and I and Karen, we all had role models when we started. Like they're less role models now. And I think the technology angle is really important though, because in those days there was no internet, there was no cell phone, so people there was the word of mouth. Oh, this person's tremendous, or we have to go to see that person. You know, like, so in a sense, Broadway was a platform that diffused this mystery. And that's the only way you could do it. You couldn't, you know, have something on the internet like today. And then of course things get dissolved on the internet.
Your Times review was the gold ring was to get your New York.
That's right. Exactly.
YouTube has been a complete game changer.
Oh, completely.
I've gone to cities in Brazil where I've never been, and sell out 800-seat theaters, and I'm convinced it's all YouTube.
Yeah.
It's around to check it out.
Right. Yeah. There's the good and the bad. Speaking of like our history and stuff, I'm really curious, what were your influences? What got you started, and who were your role models?
There weren't many around.
But you sought them out. You sought a few of them out, though.
Eventually.
Yeah. Like go back to Georgia. Like this sentence, my parents forced me to perform. Like what's the story behind that?
I called home one day and told them I was now a theater major, and they didn't disown me. Basically, I went to college as a
They did disown you, or they didn't disown you?
No, did not.
Yeah, my father disowned me a little bit when I told him I was going to, because you and I are about the same age. And then that period of time, my father was, oh, you're going to go into theater? That's all, you know, people are promiscuous and drug addicts. You know,
Well,
that's
it was either theater or ROTC. I was at Tulane University, and this is an absolute true story. I got caught in a thunderstorm, and I went into the building I was standing in front of, and I didn't realize it at the time. It was the theater building, and I got a part in a play. I ran into a kid I knew from the dorm, and they were having auditions, and I got a part in a play.
Yeah.
And it's been a slippery slope ever since.
Yeah, I was a zoology major when I started in college, because in those days, everybody was trying to beat the Russians. So they pushed you into the sciences. You know, the sciences were like the influence, and the arts were like hippies and crazy stuff, you know, at that time.
This was pre-hippies. I was a basic science nerd.
Yeah,
I think that's been my approach to theater. I was very analytical, very mathematical. And a lot of it, that whole thing about looking out and exhaling, is based on a study of the freeze, fight, or flight response and how we deal with anxiety and tension.
Yeah, it's interesting. I still access my, you know, I melted a test tube in a lab once, and I knew the sciences weren't for me. I remember we would draw things through the microscope, you know, like the cell structure. And I remember I had a beautiful drawing, and I took it to the professor, who had a beard like yours, but it was red. And I said, I was so proud of this drawing. And he looks at it and he goes, "That's not the way it is." And it broke my heart. And I'm going, the sciences are not for me. I need to go into some kind of artistic social pursuit, you know.
You melted a test tube. I did you one better. In chemistry, we read about something called thermite, which the military uses. They make these thermite bombs that are so hot, they melt through tanks. And we thought, well, that's really interesting. Let's see if we can make some. So another kid might mix some up. We put it in what's called a crucible, which is this little ceramic dish.
Right. The crucible.
We melted the dish, this kind of explosion. I went back to my high school about 15 years later, and the burned spot on the ceiling is still there. It filled an entire wing of the school with green and black smoke. Teachers came running in, and we stood there and said, "You guys don't know where all this came from."
Yeah, I actually melted a test. It was a test tube holder. That's what it was. But, you know, we were all scared of going to Vietnam. And I remember, I was flunking chemistry. My freshman year, I was not doing well. And I said, I got to get a D. You know, he said, "No, can't do that." You know, so I started finding other things to do.
So Avner, tell us, who are the people that influenced you most and set you on your path?
Well, Marceau was the first one. I saw him somewhere around my freshman year. And for me, it was the equivalent of David Copperfield making the Statue of Liberty disappear.
Yeah,
Marceau was doing magic tricks. We didn't marvel at the art of it. It was the technique. We went, "Oh my God, it looks like a wall. It looks like it's really leaning on something." Right. And so I started copying that. That was my first influence. And when I finally graduated, I kept dropping out. Well, I didn't drop out. I'd finish a year and then go to a different college. So I went to Tulane, Georgia State, and while I was at Georgia State, I did some professional theater. Then I went to School of the Arts at NYU, and finally ended up at the University of Washington. And after I paid my parking tickets, turned out I had taken too many courses, and I got a degree. And I wanted to go study with Marceau. I was absolutely fascinated.
And it was a theater degree, correct? And at UW, it was a theater degree you got.
It was a theater degree, but really by default. I wasn't really a theater major. I just had, because of my year at NYU, I had a ton of theater credits. And I sat with one of the counselors and said, "Well, what can I get a degree in?" And I took a couple of theater classes, and that's where my degree was. But I couldn't find Marceau's address in the phone book. This was pre-internet. And I had met Lecoq. Jacques and Faye came to NYU, and because I was interested in mime, I was their tech liaison, and I had their business card. So I wrote to them, and they accepted. And I thought one mime school was as good as another.
Yeah.
And boy, was I pissed off. I wanted to do this, and I complained.
I can teach you that. I still do some of that.
For the first couple of months, I complained bitterly. But then one day, I had a real epiphany. I realized how much more profound these teachings were. That, yeah, we could do those tricks, but there was a whole world of psychological engagement.
Yeah.
And then I stopped bitching and started praying. Anyway, I was lucky enough. I was invited there. You were invited for a 3-month audition period, and he invited me to stay for the rest of the year, and then to come back for the second year.
I have a question, because I've worked in drama schools my whole career, and did they ever turn anybody really down though after those 3 months? Did they ever really do that? Yeah.
Oh, over half of our class.
Oh, good. Okay, that's
so
good to hear.
We started with a morning session and an afternoon session, and we ended up with one group.
I was supposed to go there, and I was accepted to go there in 73, I think, 1973.
We would have met.
Yeah, and I got a job. Because of that mime festival in in Wisconsin, I got a job, teaching mime at the Ringling Brothers Clown College. So I ended up going to Venice, Florida instead of Paris, and I often wonder who I would have met, like yourself and, and others. At
that time, it probably seemed like a more exalted position to go.
Well, it paid me money, and it was exciting, to be, and that's where Bill Irwin was in that class, and Barry Lubin, those are some of my students. I wasn't much older than them. And so I met some fantastic artists at that point. I have stories and stories about Bill Irwin and Barry Lubin in Clown College that people haven't heard,
So Avner, how long were you at Lecoq?
Well, I was there for that first year. Over the summer, I worked at a summer camp in North Carolina. I was the drama circus teacher.
What town? What city were you in?
In Hendersonville, camp.
Oh yeah.
This was Camp Blue Star. And the Vagabond Marionettes came, and like with Lecoq, I was their lead. I set up their show for them. And when it was over, I think he thought I knew how to do puppets, and I thought he knew I didn't, but I was offered a job. And I was fascinated with marionettes. So I did this. I dropped out of the Lecoq School for a year and did a year touring with Vagabond Marionettes, doing all kinds of puppets, but mostly string puppets.
Yeah, I remember that group. I remember that group.
They're still around, and they started the Center for Puppetry Arts in Atlanta. And then at the end of that year, I reapplied to the school and was fortunate enough to be accepted back for the second year, which turned out to be a good thing, because the year I was in, these were children of the 60s. Well, in particular, 68 in Paris. They had been on the barricades. And it was a very contentious year in terms of relationship with Lecoq. And my feeling was, we're here to study with the master. Who cares if we have extra tumbling mats? I think that was one of the big issues. So I went back for the second year. And
now this is where you were arrested for public buffoonery, right? In the streets of Paris, I heard something about this.
Yeah, a friend and I put together a little show. He's still around New York, Stanley Allen Sherm. He's
he's a mask maker, isn't he? A really wonderful
makes the best leather masks.
Yeah.
He and I were partners for a while, and we put together a little street show. We were at the Palais de Chaillot, right across the river from the Eiffel Tower, and we probably had, oh my God, 600 or 800 people watching, because they were up on the top. There weren't a lot of street performers in those days. This was a new thing, doing juggling.
So this is the Pompidou. This is another area, right?
This was before Pompidou was
before.
built.
Yeah.
This was at the little plaza in front of the Palais de Chaillot. And all of a sudden we heard this, and we were surrounded by more police than I'd ever seen. They hauled us off to the station, yelled at us. Neither of us spoke French very well, so I still don't know what they said. But eventually they let us go, and I wish I could find it. It says buffoonerie au public.
Oh, wow.
Buffoonery in public. I thought, boy,
Yeah. And did you pay a
message.
fine? What, I mean, did they slap your hand or what?
Wait, what did we do? We did this in public.
Yeah. So interesting.
Tom Noddy, the bubble guy.
Mm-hmm.
Tom blows bubbles for a living. And he tells a hilarious story. He was in Santa Cruz on the street blowing bubbles, and a policeman came, told him he was going to run him in. He said, "For blowing bubbles? Come on, let's go. I want to hear you tell the judge that I was blowing bubbles in public."
Yeah.
Avner, this podcast, our audience, we've discovered it's not just for mimes, it's for people that are interested in the creative process. And one of the things that I see is so interesting about an aspect of the mime clown art form is that we're creator performers. We're not just performers that interpret, we're creator performers. Is that something that comes up in the Lecoq School? Is that a correct definition?
Absolutely. And I think that became later called devised theater, actor devised.
Which always makes me laugh because we've been devising, even Shakespeare devised, right? Shakespeare is devised theater too at one point. So it's a very funny concept.
But someone wrote the lines and someone else interpreted them. And once I had a friend, Tim Glaspie, and who's a writer, and he said, "Well, I'm going to write a show for you." And he wrote what eventually would have been a half-hour sitcom. I was like, "Wow, I didn't know you could write this stuff. I thought you had to learn to juggle and figure things out." So, but there's very little written in terms of physical comedy. So people, are devising. And I think after a while, you start to figure out what works, and then you reverse engineer and go, how did I come up with that? Are there principles that A, work, and B, that you can teach someone else?
Yeah.
And that's what I've been working on for the past years, devising. Well, I've been working for the last 35 years, but since I've been teaching these Zoom classes, really putting together a pedagogy and a curriculum,
That's important.
Principles, so that no matter what your skills are, whatever your unique talents are, you can use these principles to create material.
What's your personal standard for your actions? Do you have a personal, like, is there a standard you have to meet, or are you just discovering, or are you pleased by the possibility of failure, which I think is very important with clowning and even mime? You put yourself on the cliff, and that energy of just being there itself is very productive very often. What's your thought about that? Or the other question is, what are your favorite gags? Like, are these ones that work, or ones that have some other aspect to them,
Well, they're ones that are satisfying. First of all, there is no failure. There is only feedback.
Yeah.
So what I've come up with is that everything one does on stage is a problem to be solved or a puzzle to be worked out. And this is all very much tied into what I talked about at the beginning of creating and maintaining rapport with the audience, so that when I see the problem, they also see the problem. So that I'm not demonstrating the problem or demonstrating the solution, I'm searching for it. And this is all based on the idea that you always go to the point of finding the problem interesting. That you
How do you define interesting?
You're interested in it.
Yes.
You're not telling the audience
Yes.
to be interested.
Yes, that's it. You're right.
For example, a man, and it's the neutral place. You stay away from emotions like anger, frustration, exasperation, because you can't solve a problem when you're in that state.
So or would or if you did, you would try to like tame that or conquer that.
Yeah. Panic. It's panic.
Solve that problem of the emotion.
Yeah. And the way to do that.
It's like interest or curiosity that we're looking for.
Well, look at that whole thing of I hope it doesn't suck. What is it we're afraid of?
Yeah.
And the answer is we're afraid of not being interesting. We're terrified that the audience is going to say this is boring and get up and walk out.
That's like that exercise. I'm sure you've done things like it where you put a student in a space and you say, you have to just stay there and be with us. And they find this point at one point where they don't know what else to do. They get uncomfortable. And then that's when the interesting work starts to happen. When they're in this place of neutrality and they've exhausted all their tricks and they feel like, what am I going to do now? And then nature creates a wonderful palette for them to work in, right?
I disagree.
Okay.
I never do that. One of the deals I made with myself is that I would teach only what I do, that I would take out the tools that are in my toolkit. So that exercise is often presented in clown workshops as come out and just stand and look at the audience. Well, I never do that. And I know how uncomfortable it makes people. So I have a saying in my workshop.
But there's a difference between staring at the audience and being with the audience, like you said earlier. So there's a difference. Yeah.
I start a step before that you don't go on stage without a purpose. There's something you want to accomplish. And if you get it done, you finish early and you can go home.
That's a good
plot. Something always happens. Mm-hmm. So the writer brain creates those accidents. So I come on stage to sweep the floor, but the broom breaks. Now I got to solve that problem. I finally got that problem solved, but my hat fell off. Now I got to solve that problem. And it's just one damn thing after another.
Now I was watching a video of you just the other day doing my research. It might've been on your website and you were performing. I don't know if it was on your website, but you were performing in kind of like a ballroom for a small group of people. And I think they were Latino, I'm not sure, but I noticed that the audience was not responding all the time. They were quiet and you were doing some of your gags and acts and activities I've seen you do before. And it was interesting because nothing fazed you. Like I could tell the audience, it's one of those audiences that was a little not giving as much. And yet you kept going, but you lived in the moment and you even changed the flow a little bit that kept you interested in what was going on. And I found that fascinating because that's the challenge that especially young performers confront is when I'm not feeling laughter or it's silent. Like it took me years to understand that silence sometimes was just people concentrating really hard on what you were doing. It wasn't necessarily a bad thing, especially as a mime. But I think that experience that I was witnessing is reinforcing what you're talking about there because you had something to do, you were comfortable, and you just, tried to keep going home, so to speak,
Oh, most teachers tell their students, get out of your comfort zone. And I always tell them, please don't do that.
No, I agree with that. I
don't want to watch you floundering around. Make your comfort zone bigger. So when you're there, it feels like home.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah.
I'll tell you a little story. I was doing a show and my sailing buddy brought his sister to see the show. And she was laughing. She was yucking it up. I'm not exaggerating. He sat like this the whole show. As far as I could tell, he never cracked a smile. That was in January. In July, we were off on a little sailing trip. He said, oh, by the way, I got to tell you, my sister loved the show. She still talks about it. He said, I've probably seen your show a dozen times. I don't think I've ever laughed that hard as that night. And I realized something very important, that in his mind, he was laughing.
Yeah.
Because people aren't demonstrating laughter.
Right. That's right.
That they're not enjoying the show or participating in it.
That's the hardest thing for a young performer to understand what you're talking about. Like silence is from an audience is the young performer thinks that's death very often, but it's not necessarily. No,
not at all.
Now, do you feel, now here's a question. So we're getting older. You and I are about the same age. You know, I've been doing this since 1970, as you have. And so physical bodies change. Audiences maybe have changed. The culture has definitely changed. How have you adjusted? Like, you know, for example, if you're not, does fear ever creep in also? Like if you're not getting necessarily a reaction from the audience, like we've been talking about, do you ever reflect on, well, maybe I don't have it anymore? Because I know one artist that we're going to interview, he says, I should just hang it up. You know, at this point, just hang it up, because you get a certain age, you know, you don't have the certain fire anymore or whatever, you know, hang it up. So what's your feeling on this thing of the aging clown?
Well, I stopped doing,
so the body changes.
Yeah, I stopped doing standing back flips years ago. You know, I was a rope walker for years.
Right.
I did a slack rope act. I was known as the guy with the 5-minute rope walking act who'll do anything to avoid doing it. So it was all about the digressions, about the avoidance. It wasn't about showing off the skill. You know, the problem with skill-based acts is that many performers have the attitude, I can do this and you can't.
Also, there's always somebody better, you know. I mean, there's always, you know, you can't.
There's always that.
Yeah.
I can do this and you can't, therefore you should watch me.
Yeah.
Well, nobody wants to spend a long time with a person like that. We can admire, but we can't take.
Yeah, it's the attention span is short.
We can't.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I've edited the show as things became difficult to do. There's one move in the rope act where I'm lying on my back and the audience is singing Rockabye Baby. And when they say, and when the bow breaks, the cradle will fall, I look at them and go, ah, and spin around. Jesus, that hurt my back for a long time. I remember I had a tour in Germany for about a month of one-nighters. And here I would have a slack rope rig built at each theater. It's just 4 2x4s. And a little set of hardware that I brought with me. But there was no way to do that there. These were in little culture centers. I couldn't even get into the theater till about 5 or 6 o'clock in the evening. It was hours to set this thing up. So I rewrote the show without the slack rope. Now, when I would do a performing arts center here in the States, we'd have to show up at 10 in the morning. We had to light the whole stage, and then we had to light the slack rope, the same as the stage, but this narrow band. That took hours. So I rewrote the show without that. And also they didn't want an intermission. They were interested in an hour and 15-minute show. Oh my God, it was so much easier.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah.
I wasn't exhausted. I mean, I'd be at the end of the show. I was exhausted. Now I got to go do that. So I came back.
Oh! It's that time. It's that time. You have a package, I think you got in the mail, correct?
Yes, we've been interrupted. This is the gift music.
Yes, it's arrived.
And where's it come from?
It says from the Mime radio show. Has a UPS tracking number. What the heck is this?
Yeah.
The Mime Museum, Michael Diaz, curator.
Yeah.
These items were left on stage after a performance by Avner the Eccentric in the late 1980s in Chicago. Left here, and there's a little dice. Well, let's lift it and see. Oh my God. That is hilarious.
And those are the matches that you would have dropped on stage.
Absolutely, because every time I open that matchbox, the damn drawer is upside down. I don't know how that happens.
Well, I can see that they're very carefully fixed, so that's not going to happen with these.
Oh, this is beautiful.
What's the card say? Oh, the card. You read the card, right?
Yeah.
Avner, that was another thing that I remember seeing in your tech writer, that they must supply a whole box of matches because you must lose them every time, right?
Well, you can't travel with them. So I put in a box of kitchen matches. I had to make sure they were strike on box, not strike anywhere, because I used to shove them off stage with my broom, and occasionally they would ignite just from friction.
Wow. You know, the Mime Museum worried because we found out that maybe the package wouldn't arrive because it was matches through the mail, and we were going like, maybe that's
these are strike on box.
Yeah, we might be on some post office list because
we're being watched right now. We're being watched.
Somebody is a child of the 60s, because this is really nice macrame holding me.
I want to get back to the aging thing a moment. So, you know, I used to stand on top of, I had this whole bit that people really liked, standing on top of a ladder, just free form and doing whatever I do up there. And it was a high ladder and it was a clown. And at one point, several years ago, people started worrying about me, James, rather than the character in that predicament. Yeah. So that spoke to me a little bit, you know, because my age naturally created another sense. Now that can be productive, as we know, you know, that, you know, the old clown, you know, I always thought that aging was like, you have two like glasses of or funnels of sand. And then when you're young, the sand is at the top, filling the vessel, and it's empty on this side. But if you like an hourglass, if you flip it over through aging, the sand the physical starts drifting into the bottom, where the mental is, but the volume is always the same. In other words, you know, as you lose physicality, the mental takes over, and the volume is still the same no matter if you're 90 or 20, right?
What a nice analogy.
Yeah.
But one of the most moving performers I ever saw was the old man Turano, Thurano. We worked at a variete in Germany. He was 90 years old. He did a little tightrope act with his son. His son was 50 years old. But the old man was like 90 years old. He was legally blind, and the audience fell in love with him. And all he had to do was barely get across the rope.
Yeah. There's that magic that age brings that I think you don't realize it until you're actually there, you know, as a performer, that there is power there.
I'll tell you a story. I was doing a long run at a theater, and somebody put a table backstage where it wasn't supposed to be. And when I made one of my entrances, I kicked the leg of the table and I strained the ligaments in my foot. And I went to the doctor. I got it wrapped up. I was hobbling. I'm not exaggerating to say I was hobbling. The next afternoon, I was over at the theater taking care of some stuff, and I ran into the director, and he said, "How's your foot?" I said, "It hurts." He said, "Well, can you do the show tonight?" He was ready to cancel. I said, "Of course I can do the show." He watched me hobble and said, "How?" I said, "Look, our humor is based on laughing at the misfortunes of others. If he's old and bald and gray and limping." And sure enough, I remember it was a particularly rewarding show. It's not based on showing off for the audience, for me. It's based on establishing a bond from the very beginning, from the first second you're on stage, so that they're feeling what you're feeling, so that when the character succeeds, the audience succeeds. When the character is disappointed, the audience is disappointed.
Yeah. That's so wonderful. That's the essence of it right there. That's really wonderful.
Yeah. And the question is, can you teach that? That was the big question.
So how do you feel about that? Do you feel like you can teach that?
Well, I've had over 300 students on Zoom from 34 countries.
Wow.
Since last spring.
Wow.
Fantastic. Yeah.
And I've had several people come back more than one. In fact, one person's doing it for the third time. Yes, I think so. And it's as I said, I think it's a program of attitudes and techniques that allow you to create that rapport relationship with the audience. And then your job is to maintain it.
Has the Zoom, this is a question for today, has the Zoom format challenged you, or have you found you've been able to adapt to it? Are there strengths in live versus Zoom? I mean, what have you found in that experience?
The first one, there was a workshop scheduled in LA, and the pandemic hit and we canceled it. And a bunch of people that were in the workshop said, well, can you do something for us? And I said, yeah, fine, we'll do something on Zoom, but I can't charge you for it. I thought it was impossible because it's movement based. It's movement theater.
Yeah.
Well, we did 4 sessions, 4 2-hour sessions once a week. I find after 2 hours, people start drooling. It's too much.
Right. I found an hour and a half is about a good length.
Yeah, I agree. So I started to develop a format. And I've had, gosh, I'd have to add it up, but probably 20 or 30 of these workshops. I take only 12 students. We meet for 2 hours, 1 day a week. It's the first hour is a presentation based on what I call eccentric principles, and like be interested, not interesting, and things like that.
Yeah.
And here's something that I found is an asset to working on Zoom. When you do a live workshop, first of all, you don't have 12 people, you have 20 people. You can wait 2 days to finally get up and do something. Talk about anxiety producing, and you never get to do it again. The class moves on. So with only 12 people, I give an assignment every week to make a 1 to 2 minute video on a theme using these concepts about clowning. They upload them to YouTube, send them to me. I download them and send comments, and they can redo them. So I'm teaching 2 workshops at a time. So I get up to about 40 or 50 emails and videos a week, but that's what I do for a living now. And
that's wonderful.
I was going to say,
I want to sign up, Avner. That sounds great.
Look on my website. There are 2 that have registration open right now, and we're booking into January.
Excellent.
Do you feel that teaching is part of the mission of being a performing artist? I mean, some like to, some don't like to. I've always felt that. I've always taught from the beginning. I mean, I started teaching actually at my Humboldt State University before I'd even graduated. They let me teach what I was doing, and I remember going like, wow, these PhD masters professors are letting me teach something, and like there's something here. But for me, that teaching is a sacred process, and it goes in hand with performing. The teaching helps me figure out what I do on stage, and vice versa. You know, a good teaching, for me, teaching is a good performance in a sense. You know, you can usually do it. You teach. My philosophy is you teach what you know with passion, honestly. And that's the secret to good teaching. You know, you don't try to teach something you don't know about. It's just what you know and so forth. But I've always felt that one of my responsibilities as an artist was to be a teacher. And I think back to how teachers influenced me. And that's such a powerful process in the development of a young artist. You know, of course, you find your own. I mean, the whole purpose is to find your own voice, right? But you need help when you're a young person very often, or you need enlightenment or whatever you want to call it. But how do you feel about that?
I started
the teaching element, you know, in conjunction with your world of performance.
When I came back from the Lecoq School in the early 70s, I didn't really have a show. And so
I think I saw one of your first ones in Humboldt County. You know,
yes, that was the first one. And in fact, I did 2 versions. I did one talking and one silent. And Carlo the next day said, forget the talking. You're just another guy. You're just another guy telling jokes. Something happens when you don't talk. that attaches to the other side of the audience's brain. So I was doing a lot of, it was all I could get was residencies, and then I got to do a show. So I remember I had a few numbers of my own, and I would direct things with the students. So that's where the teaching began. I think that, teaching and learning don't necessarily go hand in hand.
Right.
One of the things I've noticed is that many, if not most, teachers teach what their teachers taught.
Okay.
And I think we end up with things that are sort of like junk DNA. They're still part of the genome, but they don't really do anything.
But do you feel you're doing that? Do you teach what someone taught you?
Well, I think, I feel Lecoq's presence.
Well, that's different. I think presence is a good thing, though.
Yeah.
I think he was a masterful teacher.
Mm-hmm.
The success comes in the response of a teacher only exists through their students.
Yeah, you're only as good as your students in the
and
end.
Their students' success. So
yeah, you're right.
I really enjoyed teaching, and it is a kind of a performance, and I've thought a lot about it. And my hypnosis training has changed the way I teach in, I think, really good ways.
Am I going to do something strange?
Tell us a little bit more
Are
about
you hypnotizing us now? Yeah.
Do you have some reason to think I'm not?
Well, I think any person in the public eye who's successful creates some kind of hypnotic state in their viewers. So I'm unquestionably, you're hypnotizing us in some form right now. So
tell us a little bit about your experience as a hypnotist and how that came about.
Yeah.
Or using hypnotism.
Let me see. I can't find it. I'll find it later. I started. I've been interested in what's called Ericksonian, which is the work of Milton Erickson. Ever since I have a number where I have a person hold their arms up like this, and they get tired. Mm-hmm. And I read in an account, there's a wonderful book I recommend to everyone. It was a real life-changing for me, called Uncommon Therapy by Jay Haley. It's about the work of Erickson. And he tells a story about Erickson being giving a lecture at a medical school on medical uses of hypnosis. And he asked for a demonstration subject. Excuse me. And the person they provided didn't speak any English, and he didn't speak any Spanish. And he describes producing a profound trance just in shaking hands. And Erickson, in some of his papers, talks about the process of what he was doing, because even Erickson said trained professionals would never figure out what I'm doing.
But good teaching is trancing the students.
Absolutely.
I'm starting, and a good performance is trancing the audience.
Yeah.
And
well,
you meet them in a different area. So, I've always used that phrase, I'm going to trance you guys, or you've been tranced.
What do you do when you make an entrance? You entrance.
That's right.
So how did you use it for this?
So I read about this handshake induction. And I have a moment where I shake hands with this person that's going to do this. And I thought, well, let's see what happens. And I started playing around with those techniques. And you know what? Their hands would just stay there. They didn't get tired. They didn't wonder what's going on.
Yeah.
It was magical. So years later, so I read a lot about Erickson. It was just interesting to me. I developed two things. One, the idea that when I go to theater and it really works, it's like a hypnotic trance situation. Mm-hmm. I lose all sense of time and body awareness. I can sit there, I can drool, I can sit there for half an hour and not realize that time has passed. And when you go to theater and it doesn't work, it's like a trip to the dentist without Novocaine.
Well, every great leader knows how to trance,
Yeah.
Good leaders, good and bad, throughout history of humans, has been able to trance
That's what they say.
subjects. Yeah.
So
Does the beard have something to do with that? I want to talk to you about the beard a little later, but
I had 6 months.
Fidel Castro had a beard like this.
Right. I had 6 months off for shoulder surgery and I couldn't work.
Mm-hmm.
And I started to get feedback, and maybe I was listening for it, that people that were at the show felt entranced. They said, "Oh, you had me in the palm of your hand." And I felt like I was in a trance. And I couldn't believe it was a whole hour. That was, the kinds of things I wanted to hear. And I realized that most performers view their relationship with the audience like a gambling game. You ask them, "How's the show going to be?" They go, "Well, I hope they like it."
Mm.
Mm-hmm.
And I have, well, not always, but I've developed a view that it's a craft. It's like a plumber. You say, "Can you fix that pipe?" You go, "Yeah."
Mm-hmm.
Can you do this show? Can you do this?
But here's the guy you said it was standing like this, watching your show.
Yeah.
And I was talking about silence. Now that could be the product of this trance that has been
Absolutely
laid out,
Yes.
That's
his
the product of the trance. Yeah.
in his mind, he was laughing.
Yeah.
So I did, and I know that hypnotists, and this is clinical hypnosis, not stage hypnosis, they get a trance every single time.
Yes.
Mm.
And we don't, because our training stops at the proscenium.
Mm.
Ah.
Everything we learn is about what the actor's doing, what the actor feels, how the actor moves, and doesn't really take into account what's happening in the mind and body of the audience.
Uh-huh.
But you're saying,
Yeah.
you're saying as a clown, you want to be able to understand what's happening in the audience.
Me personally wanted to understand.
No, I think that's correct. I mean, I think, that the what's on the other side of the other, or what's on the other side of that, that's important. This idea of infinity, infinity is inclusive, but it's also what's next, what's over there, I think the performer has to understand that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, the question was also, can you understand what's going on in the mind and body of the audience?
Mm.
And what's your
So
answer?
I went and took a resounding yes.
Good.
I went for a 5-day seminar for mental health professionals. I sort of talked my way into it, and I got everything I needed. But the last day, the instructor said, "Look, we've got an extra half hour. We've covered all the material. I want to demonstrate a technique for treating trauma."
Mm-hmm.
And I've since come to understand that everybody is dealing with trauma on one level or another. Someone got up who had been attacked on the street. She was a social worker. She couldn't go to work. She was having panic attacks. Mm-hmm. He said, "You want to change that?" She said, "Yeah." He said, "Okay, where are you on a 0 to 10 scale?" She said, "I'm at about 15. She was crying. He did this technique. He didn't explain it. He just demonstrated it. In 20 minutes, he finished. He said, "Where are you now?" She said, 3.
Wow.
He said, "Well, yeah, get the old feeling back so we can test our work." She said, "I can't. It's not there."
Mm.
At which point he turned to the group of the other students and said, "Who wants to sign up for the next workshop? I'll be teaching this technique."
Oh my.
So I started for about 5 years. I took a series of workshops every year and eventually got certified as an Ericksonian hypnotherapist. And then I got certified to teach it. And it has profoundly influenced my teaching and my performing. If nothing else, I've opened my radar to understand and feel what the audience is feeling and to give it time to happen.
Now, when you pick an activity on stage, whatever you want to call it, the gag, the joke, the action, are you doing it for yourself, or are you doing it for what the audience might like?
I'm doing it for myself.
For yourself.
And the process is that I find the problem interesting. I come up with a solution that I know will work. If it doesn't
Talking
work,
about dramatically, or both, or
both.
the actual solve
No,
the problem.
more
Yeah.
physical. It's actually,
Yeah.
but there is a psychological component. And when I solve it, it pleases me. I'm satisfied. And then what I'm sharing with the audience is that satisfaction. I'm not telling them to like it.
Mm-hmm.
And when is enough? Like, is that when that satisfaction seems to be present? That's
That's
the
it.
end of that moment. That's it.
It's
You're
done.
home. You're home. Yeah.
Well, you go find the next problem. You know,
Yeah,
a clown without a problem to solve is dead in the water. So one solution leads to the next problem.
No matter how big, like, how do I live? You just like, it could be very small or very big.
I think more interesting is no matter how small.
Yeah.
So we look for solutions that the audience goes, wow, I never thought of that.
Yeah.
And what we don't want the audience doing is, well, I could have done that.
Oh.
I've got another package.
What? It's fire.
God, it's getting hot in here.
Does it feel hot, Avner?
Put it out. Put it out over there. Put it out. Ay.
Uh-oh.
It's time. It's time for rapid fire. Okay. This is what
Here we
we're
go,
going to do.
Avner. Sorry for the interruption, but it's time for. Ooh, yes,
Rapid
you're ready.
fire.
I see you're ready.
All right. This is how it works. I'm going to give you some words, and you're going to, by word association, give me some quick answers. Okay. You've seen this before. And just off the top of your head, as quickly as you can, you're going to respond with one or two words and an answer to my word. Okay. Word association. In other words, are you ready?
Word association.
Yeah. Would you're game to do this? Okay. Here we go. Hands.
Feet.
Eyes.
Feet.
Fourth wall.
No fourth wall.
Sweat.
Effort.
Child.
That's
good.
Indecision.
Elder.
Statesman.
Oh, nice. Props.
Stuff.
Mask.
Face.
Age.
Situation.
Failure.
Feedback.
Critic.
A helper.
Teacher.
Student.
Fame.
Doom.
It's like the Jewel of the Nile or something. Right?
Yeah,
we haven't even talked about that stuff.
Look into that one.
Language.
Words.
Mime.
Feet.
Cloud.
You say clown?
I did say cloud.
4-letter word.
Future.
Past.
Okay, good. All right,
Nice.
now. Bravo. We're gonna do the same.
Did you give him a grade? Did he pass?
He did very well. I'd say that's a B+ at least. So
Avner, now we have to ask you why you said fame, doom.
Do you know Samuel Beckett's biography is called Doomed to Fame?
well, I didn't know that.
Oh.
I'm a fan of Beckett. I didn't know that.
Title, and that's what I thought of.
Yeah.
And you've played Estragon and Vladimir.
I have.
That's my favorite play. I've directed it, and
Mine too.
I really want to do it again someday.
How was the challenge? How was the challenge for you to be a speaking actor after being?
Good question. Yeah. What drove you?
nonverbal.
Because you've done so much theater as well as the clowning, but more clowning. But what was the decision, or is it all the same depending on what you like to do?
Each time has been different. When I was asked to do Godot, I was at Pittsburgh Public. The first time I was at Pittsburgh Public Theater doing my show, and the director of the theater said, "We're putting together a vaudeville version of Godot," and they wanted to get Bill Irwin to play the other part.
Well, Beckett even said that Godot was a clown show. He said that.
Absolutely.
It is. That's the way I directed it. Yeah.
So how did it seem? Did you like it?
Oh, yeah. It was great. I think by the end of the run, I started to understand it.
Yeah.
But I'll tell you a funny story, because James, you know this, having directed it. There are lots of lines that both characters say at different points.
Yeah.
At one point in every,
it's very rhythmic. It's very kinetic. Yeah.
You're sailing along in Act 2, and all of a sudden you're back in Act 1 again, going,
yeah,
wait a minute, I said that already.
Yeah, so, I remember when I was in it, I lost, every actor loses their place sometime. And I remember that play was particularly challenging because of that. Yeah.
So we're there. The four of us are standing on stage, and it just stopped. And we're all looking at each other. And the stage,
I had that same experience in that play.
The stage manager finally calls out the line.
Yeah.
Which was, well, what do we do now? And we looked at each other.
And it worked.
Lucky, who has no lines in this scene, looked up at the stage manager and said, we know what the line is. Who says it?
And it fit. It totally fit. Did you feel, I don't know who the other actors were with you, but did you feel you had a particular handle on the material, maybe because you had this clown spirit in you that the others might have been approaching it more conventionally as actors, the conventional actor?
I worked with a marvelous actor named David Hurst, who played Vladimir in this original production. And I was quite young when I did it. And he's a real method actor, done a lot of films. He was the landlord in The Boys from Brazil, for example. But he's a real actor, and it was terrifying, but also sobering. Same thing happened on Jewel of the Nile. I remember my first scene with Kathleen Turner, which was my first scene.
Yeah.
We're standing there just chatting, and the director goes, action, and she became a different person.
And what gave you the confidence to find your place in those situations? What did you draw upon?
I went into it thinking I would use all of my Lecoq training. All of that went out the window on this first day. This is like when you buy furniture and you go get the raw stuff without any finish on it. It takes all the varnish off, and you have to really be there.
Now, what in terms of Godot, though, what did you draw upon there to give you confidence in the face of this, very accomplished actor? I have a hunch that your physicality and your sense of surrealism and meticulousness as a clown helped you.
Yeah, it was a question of starting with whatever I started with and winnowing it down to whatever was working. It's like you were talking about gags. If gags aren't working, you leave them and you do different ones.
Yeah, you have to move on. Why go your route and not into more legitimate theater experiences? What made you
I've always gone where it was easy. Wherever I had work, that's where I went. So it wasn't a plan. It was, I was climbing this ladder of success, but I didn't realize it was a ladder. I was just going from gig to gig. One thing led to another.
Extraordinary.
How did your wife Julie influence you in this journey over the years?
Yes, tell us a little bit about Julie. She was a remarkable woman. She's somebody that I really looked up to and admired, and enjoyed watching her perform.
Julie was amazing, just amazing. I had a lot of skills. She had talent. And she produced, after we got married, 2 fully mounted one-woman shows. Which you can see. They're both on YouTube, and you can access them. When she died, we made a website that accesses that. And she wrote this wonderful book called Life in a Clown House, a manual and a memoir.
It is wonderful. I had the experience of when I was touring my show in Mexico. We were going from city to city on a 7-city tour, and her show was the one that was right before mine. So every time we came into town, I get to see her show again.
Oh,
So
great.
every single city I got to see her perform.
Yeah.
And I my experience with her was so amazing because we were both the North American concerned with time and schedule and will we get all the tech done and what we need. And it took us like the whole tour for both of us to get to the moment where we like, oh, Mexico runs on different energy. Mexico time is totally different.
I remember one day her technician and I were sitting on the stairs of the hotel. We were supposed to be picked up at 11 o'clock in the morning to go to the theater.
You're talking about Mexico or somewhere else?
This was in Mexico.
Yeah.
At 1 o'clock, he's pacing around and he says, "Do you think we should call somebody?" I said, "Only if you think it'll do some good."
Well, I found in Mexico, I think I was in that same festival.
Mm-hmm.
And I never got to see Karen because I was in another city, and I forgot that Julie was there too. And you were there too, probably accompanying her.
I was there on other.
Yeah, I remember my what I learned from Mexico is it'll happen. You can't panic, you can't worry. And then when you first go, it's like, oh, they're not here now, and where's the lights and where's the technician? But eventually, if you just wait, it will happen, and that's a great lesson right there.
There's a story about a technician from Maine who went down to work on a show in Mexico. And they sat him down the first day and explained the concept of mañana.
Mm-hmm.
When they finished, they said, "Do you have anything like that in Maine?" He said, "I can't think of anything that pressing."
Avner, what was
Go ahead, Karen.
What was it like for you and Julie to have these parallel careers? Because her focus in creating all these many really wonderful shows, and your like sort of one person show, they're similar but very different.
Julie was also a gifted musician.
Mm-hmm.
And she was one of the founders of a klezmer band called the Casco Bay Tumblers. And that was a full-time job. She also had a group called MSA, the Maine Singers Atelier, that she directed. She did coaching. She directed plays. She was so busy. If anything, she was spread too thin.
She's a
was
wonderful.
she able to?
I loved her classes, especially the.
And she was a gifted teacher. This pedagogy that I've been talking about, we developed that together. Mm-hmm. In 30 years of teaching together at the barn.
Mm-hmm.
Was she able to offer criticism for your work in process? Could she call you to the carpet? Was she able to get to the heart of like maybe some challenges that you had and help you through certain moments?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Of course.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Did you two perform together?
We were in a Broadway show together called Ghetto.
Uh-huh.
This is the one where I played a ventriloquist and my dummy was nominated for a Tony Award. She was.
Is that a fact? Is that the dummy was nominated?
Oh, yeah.
That's funny.
What was it? A serious play, a comedy?
Oh, very serious. It's about there was a theater troupe at the Ghetto in Lithuania, in Vilnius. And she was one of the Ghetto members and a member of, there was a little band that played that were made up of the people. No, we checked into the Ghetto every night. And our son was 4 months old. And that was hard.
Traumatic.
So hard. But yeah, we did that together. We did another show called The Zoo of Tranquility, which is also, you can see it on that, through that website, about men's sometimes disastrous, but always creative relationship to machines that was based on a book called Spooner's Moving Animals, which is a book where you build all these kinetic sculptures. I have a basement full of these things. We have a 9-foot tall mechanical chicken that made out of found objects and lays an egg. That was in the show. So Julian, this was a two-hander, and we did that show at Long Island Stage for a couple of months. Mm-hmm. So yeah, we worked together quite a lot.
That sounds
always a pleasure.
Yeah.
How do you feel about legacy, Avner? How do you what does that mean to you?
Isn't that a Subaru?
Here's my legacy. 19.
I don't know. I can't think that far into the past.
Yeah.
To see how it comes together. That's something that's going to be in the minds of other people.
Yeah, I feel that your teaching probably will have some legacy value. It's, every great teacher has that work, like take Lecoq, his legacy is what he passed on to others, and they've shaped it and formed it in different ways. But that to me seems like one of the products of legacy that is productive, rather than just being in the spotlight,
And yet I see his name fading.
Yeah, well,
what?
Humans have short memory. Even Marceau, people, the
Oh,
younger generation,
they
don't know who he is. No.
I always teach this movement in a workshop. Anybody there's always one or two who can do it, and I'll single them out and say, which Lecoq student did you study with? And it's always right.
I remember one that you taught, which was the Avner swing.
Yes,
all the way around.
That's right.
It's the best warm up, and it's so much fun to watch the students try to. I said, just stop thinking, just do it.
Well,
didn't Carlo do that? Didn't Mazzoni?
You have to get the brain out of the way because you're contracting and expanding at the same time, and you can't stop and think about it.
I remember Carlo doing some moves similar to that. Maybe that one. Did he teach you the four-legged, four-limbed walk on the floor?
Yes, doing different
I've used that quite a bit. That idea. That's
animal walk.
Animal walk,
and that was straight from Lecoq.
Yeah,
it was a Lecoq exercise.
But originally, that was an exercise for therapy to work on coordination.
Well, it's Feldenkrais.
Yeah, very interesting. So, what about the future? If the legacy is kind of confusing, what about the future? How do you look at that?
One day at a time.
Yeah,
it's like AA.
And you like to bake bread.
Yeah.
And you like the oven, the work with the oven, correct?
Yeah.
I'm getting a new oven.
That's great. So, Avner, of all the places that your work have taken you around the world, what's your favorite place?
Peaks Island, Maine.
Home.
And what about disaster stories? Do you have any these places that you've been taken? Is there a particular event that happened that sticks in your mind? That's there's numerous, I'm sure, but is there anything you can share about?
Oh, absolutely.
The adventure of the touring life.
Yeah, I don't have too many disaster stories because I'm pretty even tempered. I don't get mad about it.
Yeah.
I had a tour in Louisiana that was a block booking. If you don't know what that is, that's where you got
I know what that
6 or 8 dates. And I don't do kid shows. And I had to do 2 or 3 school shows. And I was a little apprehensive about it. I'm trying hard to be a sophisticated clown for adults, which is why I got rid of the red nose, a lot of the reason. Yeah. And I got a call one day from someone who had never heard of me. Hi, I'm the principal of a school, and this was a couple hours down the pike here in Maine, a little rural school. Would you come do some shows for us? I think he had like $500. He wanted 4 shows. We ended up that I did 1 show, and I showed up, and I asked for a 10 by 12 carpet. They had a bath mat. with a rubber back. We didn't know if you were serious. No tech writer.
Oh dear.
And they lumped together. There were about probably 300 kindergarten through 3rd graders. Boy. So I benefited from this greatly because I came up with a pre-show speech that I would not do a kid show without. I started by, because I do this thing with cigarettes and matches. You're well aware. I did that on the Today Show for some reason. And they brought in an elementary school class. I got hate mail.
Because of
how could you do a thing with cigarettes with kids? I said, it's an anti-smoking piece. Didn't you get it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I came up really top of my head. I said, how many of you smoke? To these kindergartners and third graders, and 4 or 5 of them raised their hand.
You know, it's interesting how culture has changed.
What happened?
I said, well, I don't. And I'm going to mess around with cigarettes in a little while in the show. But they're going to end up in the garbage where they belong.
Yeah. You know, it's interesting how culture has defined us, how it's changing. You know, I used to do a piece where, you know, it was an artist drawing a subject from the audience, and I'd always pick a man with a wristwatch. So I do this elaborate build up to this piece of art I was working on, and in the end, you know, that it was revealed I had just drawn the person's wristwatch. They'd be in these. But I found that as time went on in recent years, men don't wear wristwatches anymore. So I ended up putting a red ball in their hand, and I ended up drawing the ball, you know. But
did you ever learn to steal watches?
What's that?
Did you ever learn to steal watches?
Oh,
no, I haven't.
Avner, I have a funny question, a funny story.
Wait, let me finish this culture thing. I want to like this idea of the cigarettes and the wristwatches, and it, you know, the culture has changed the way the audience perceives things.
Right. No more smoking. Mime gags with.
No, I had a student just the other day who does a thing where she comes in and goes, and then blows a smoke ring.
That's
and then she goes like this and spits water. And it's very clever, but I said, yeah, I got to tell you, I have a visceral reaction to the smoking. I don't want to.
Yeah.
See it.
People don't.
But it reminded me of one of the funniest things I've ever seen. Victor Borga.
Oh, he's fantastic.
On stage, holding a cigar, which you don't see, and he gets a standing ovation. It's like at the Kennedy Center, and it's a long standing ovation. And when it's finally finished, he blows a smoke ring. And it's hilarious, but I don't want to see it anymore.
Yeah.
Avner, when we were talking about the wristwatches, when you were way back in Chicago, when you were here, my husband was a freelance writer and he interviewed you. And in the process of interviewing you, you stole his watch.
Oh, I'm so embarrassed.
And he had no clue how you did it.
No, of course not. Actually, in Chicago one time, I took a guy's watch, and it was one of those huge chronometers, like a skin diving watch. And I walked behind him and put it on my wrist. We finished the thing that we were doing in the show, and I started to escort him back to his seat. And I went, and I showed him the watch. He looked at it, he went, "I've got one just like that at home."
So if your beard had a name, what would you call it? Tell me about the beard, because the beard is part of your identity.
When I went to hypnosis training, these are all mental health professionals. These are licensed therapists. And because of the way the schedule worked, I had to take level 2 first and then go back and catch level 1. So I had no idea what they were talking about. By the second day, and I'm sure this was the beard, people were coming to me for advice.
So what
little Freudian, right?
What role has that played in your performing career, the beard? Because when I first saw you in 1973, you didn't have a beard, I'm sure. Or did, maybe it was dark at that time. My friend Bob Francisconi, I don't know if you've met him or not, but he has a beard like that. But is the beard a cultural thing with a certain group? Like, is it Jewish? Is it old man? Is it wise man? Is it Avner himself? What is it? What is it?
Like shaving. It's crazy.
But does it have a name?
No.
Will you ever shave it off?
I shaved it a couple of times. I shaved it for Ghetto. because Jewish men didn't have, except for Orthodox, but I wasn't an Orthodox, the ventriloquist guy. Yeah. So I had to shave for that. And one day on July the 3rd, I shaved. I hadn't seen my face in years. And we had a cookout on the 4th.
Is that your oven? Is that your
oven?
No,
something's wrong with my smoke detectors. They do that about 6 times a day.
We just were doing this. I don't know. There's something in there, magic in the air.
I changed the batteries yesterday, and they're still doing it. I don't know. Anyhow,
that's appropriate to the interview. Anyway, let it ring. So go ahead. Yeah.
I was standing. We were having a cookout, and I was standing at the grill, and a friend of ours on the island came to our party, walked up to me, shook my hand, and said, "Hi, I'm Kevin. I'm a friend of Avner and Julie's."
Funny.
When I shaved I shaved for Crimes and Misdemeanors too, for the Woody Allen film. And my first scene was I played a campus radical, and then I became a therapist, so I had to shave that night. And Zev was talking, so he must have been about 9 months to a year. We were sitting at dinner at my mother-in-law's house, and I said, he was used to me being gone because I traveled so much. I said something, and he went, "Daddy?" And he looked around. I wasn't there. He relaxed again. I said something else.
He didn't recognize you, but he heard the voice.
We went into a Madison Avenue building that I thought had a big window into the matching lobby. And there was a whole group of people, and it was a whole camera crew and people carrying booms. And I saw a guy dressed just like me.
You didn't even.
I looked at him. I thought, they're making a movie over there too. And he waved. I went, "Oh my God, that's a mirror!" And I didn't recognize myself.
Do you think? Do you think? With all this talk about hypnotism and therapy and inner life, and you think clowns should be licensed? You've talked about your journeys with Aikido and the Ericksonian hypnotism, but should a clown have a certain permission or certification to apply their art? I mean, I'm talking metaphorically here, but what's the standard? Or is there one? I don't know. What do you think?
I hope it doesn't suck.
Yeah.
When I go to see it, and I'm so pleased when it doesn't.
Would that be the advice you would give to young artists? Like, what advice would you give to these young people today that are interested in what's that?
Take a nap before you go on stage.
Take a nap.
That's wonderful.
Yeah.
And it's I've answered those questions for myself, and that's what I teach. And that was always the question: can I figure out what I'm doing, and people that I admire, can I figure out what they're doing? Are there common principles to those things that we can talk about and identify, and can they be taught to other people? And it's wonderful in these Zoom classes. The first week they get an assignment, they send back the videos, and I'm always going, "Oh my God, what were they thinking?" Oh my. And by the third week, they're capturing the audience.
That's wonderful.
That is, to me, that's the reward.
And is that, you think the advice, don't suck?
No. Don't worry about sucking.
Yeah.
No.
Right.
Send the message.
So the message is, don't worry about sucking. That's the advice. Yeah.
The message is, I'm comfortable with you watching me.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's beautiful. Avner, it's been such a great privilege and so much fun to talk to you. And we're so glad that you came to be on the Mime Radio Show.
You're very welcome. It's been a pleasure.
I have one more question. I have one more question.
Oh, you do? What is it?
What do you want to be when you grow up, Avner?
You know what Peter Pan said, once you grow up, you can't go back.
Thank you so much, Avner.
Thank you.
Bravo. Wonderful conversation.
This has been wonderful.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you for listening to the Mime Radio Show. Join us in 2 weeks for an interview with Nola Ray.